and I've talked about this before. I have, for whatever reason, become a bit of the sort of the UFO guy sometimes on Discovery Network or on Science Channel, or and the point being, and this is what you're talking about, and I agree with you 100%. Look, of course we have compartmentalized programs. Of course we have secret programs, right? And of course, as I think Nancy Mace pointed out during the hearings, there are programs with budgets, hidden budgets, and that is true as well, right? If you have a black program, typically the budgets are buried inside of other more exposed programs. And so you've got this, and that always leads to then cynicism about what the government's up to. And then the other side of this coin is the necessity. Okay, well, why did we have an ATIP? Why did we have an Advanced Aeronautics Threat Identification Program office at the Pentagon? Of course, because there's aliens out there. Well, no, to your point, because from national security perspective, it's important to understand what's out there that we can't readily identify. So an Navy aviator sees something and he says, I got to report this, can't quite identify it. And it looks unusual. Maybe it's a different propulsion system, material science issue, whatever. We have to understand it. So you have to have the ability within the government to pursue these anomalies, these things that we can't easily say, okay, this is what that was.
Yes, exactly. And I would just say that I hope people don't think that all we got out of Operation Paperclip at the end of the Second World War was rockets and jet engines. There was an entire new science being developed at places like Peenemünde by the Nazi scientists, and we were racing with the Soviets for a reason to get our hands on that science, and we did mostly get our hands on that science, and that is a credit to the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. And for about 70 or 80 years now, we've been able to, I think, experiment with highly advanced technologies and build off of it. And this is something that the former head of Skunk Works alluded to in the 90s. I've been out to Edwards Air Force Base. I know a lot of people out there. I talk there usually once a year. And I've always gotten the sense that there are some very advanced programs out there that we will never know about. And in fact, other parts of the government probably don't even know about, because like you said, this is so highly compartmented. And when I worked on the Hill trying to regulate and oversee the military budget, it's almost a futile exercise because of how they layer these things together.
So what do you make of, if we look at the hearing that they had up on Capitol Hill, what do you make of some of the testimony from folks like, Lou Elizondo and Michael Schellenberger, where they're not just saying that we have government programs because we're looking at the issue of hostile nations perhaps developing new material science capabilities that we need to know about. They're saying, they're appearing to say that there's extraterrestrial evidence that the government's been sitting on.
It's hearsay, and that's not to say that I wouldn't listen to somebody like Lou Elizondo, who has the kind of background that he does in counterintelligence and whatnot. I do think it's interesting a counterintelligence operative is saying this stuff in the public space, but okay. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just haven't seen anything compelling to make me think that little green men, and this is probably my own bias, but my little green men are coming down here when we're not even questioning beyond the rudimentary, well, is it us? And then we hear from people like Lou saying, oh no, there's no possible way it's us. Well, how do you know that? With all due respect, nobody in government has all the answers. The government is like 2 million employees. They don't know what's going on in other departments and offices in other departments. And so, we really should be, investigating just what exactly have we been funding in the black budget for the last 70 years. And I think the answers would be really incredible. Not that I think that we should, by the way, release all of that information, because there is national security that we have to worry about. But, clearly there is a concern on the part of the public that needs to be allayed. And I think it's sort of I think it's a kind of a cop-out to say, well, it's little green men. Well, when our F-16 and F-22 pilots are operating in restricted military airspace and they're encountering these things in a dangerous way, we should probably get to the bottom of it, and we should not be surprised if maybe it's an enemy threat actor operating in our airspace, or even one elite unit trying to figure out how our best pilots would respond under duress. I mean, we don't know, but aliens just seems so, otherworldly.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think the unsatisfying part of any of these hearings, not that they've had a lot of hearings. I think 2022 was the first one they had in like 50 years about UFOs.
Yeah.
So we don't have a long history of UFO hearings up on Capitol Hill. But I think that the unsatisfying part of it is what you alluded to, which is that there's never any specifics. Right? You'll get testimony. Well, we've got, the government's sitting on evidence. Well, okay, well, what's that evidence? Well, I can't talk about it. Or, they've got stuff. They're holding on to stuff. Well, what is that stuff? Well, I can't talk about it. Or, I just know that they've got it. And that leaves people. Yeah. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying, well, when David Grush was testifying last year, I remember he said that, I can't reveal this without being in a skiff. And then they said, well, unfortunately, the skiffs aren't being made available. And I worked on the Hill. That's okay. That's an odd statement to make. The skiffs aren't being made available. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like it's just the whole thing's a little odd. Maybe they don't want to talk about it, and that's why. And by they, I mean whoever's covering it up, X-Files style. But I don't know. I'm very skeptical about how this is going about, and it's just strange to me that we're being told to completely upend our worldview about basic questions of religion and life based on just take my word for it. This is sort of a
No, I think it is. Look, if you go back years, decades and decades ago, and if you had a pilot, a military pilot, and he spotted something that was out there, and it was moving in an unusual fashion or whatever, there was no upside for him to land back on the carrier or wherever he was flying out of and say, I think I spotted because all they had for it at the time was a UFO, right? I mean, and that had taken on such a stigma that there was no upside for anyone to come through and say, okay, I've seen this, let me file a report. It's not going to be all that helpful to your record, when you're looking for your next promotion.
They'll probably ground you.
So I think they'll probably
Yeah.
ground you. Yeah. So I think Pentagon had gone to the length of saying, we have to come up with some way of cataloging these sightings and then trying to investigate them. And then we're going to tick a bunch of them off because we're going to say, okay, the sighting was not, accurate, or we can explain it was a balloon or a drone, whatever. So that's a good thing that we actually advanced the ball. Now, I guess on the margins, what it also does is it creates paranoia and it creates cynicism and it creates this belief that they are hiding something because, the one truism about the American public is they always assume the government's hiding something. And, okay, they're not always wrong.
They're not always wrong. No.
They're not always wrong. And so I guess, where I'm going with this is it's important, right, that we understand the national security perspective, the reason why you would want to do this. And then it's important to also understand that every time you hold a hearing on Capitol Hill, there's an obligation, right?
Yes.
Because it just perpetuates this problem. If Nancy Mace comes up and as the head of the subcommittee and says, well, some unnamed people tried to pressure us into not holding this hearing. Okay, I'm sorry. Who were the unnamed people? It's like saying we're sitting on a trove of evidence. Okay, well, where's the evidence sitting?
Right.
You were involved in this program, so tell us a little bit more. So you're always sort of getting this tantalizing tidbit, and then that just kind of keeps feeding the idea that the government's hiding something. And again, I'm not saying they're not. Maybe they are. Never say never, as far as I'm concerned, right? I don't believe personally that we're alone out here, that somehow life on Earth is all it is, right? So
I agree with that. I'm not sure that they're visiting us, and if they are, why haven't they made themselves available? Why? I mean,
because they're so disappointed. They're so disappointed, Brandon, in what they're seeing. They've traveled for light years to get here, right? I mean, all those, they sat in that goddamn spaceship for light years, and then they get here, and this is what they find? They just move on. They go to the next one, right?